You break under pressure constantly, weakening when facing stress rather than strengthening from it, deteriorating under chaos rather than thriving in uncertainty, becoming fragile through avoiding challenge rather than building resilience through embracing difficulty, and treating stress as enemy to avoid rather than stimulus for growth that makes you stronger, tougher, and more capable. This fragility is destroying your potential by keeping you in protected comfort zones where no growth happens, destroying your resilience by preventing the stress exposure that builds mental toughness, destroying your adaptability by making you dependent on stable conditions that rarely exist, destroying your competitive advantage because anti-fragile competitors get stronger from the same chaos that weakens you, and destroying your capacity to handle the inevitable difficulties that all achievement requires because you've built fragility rather than resilience. Anti-fragility means gaining from disorder, getting stronger from stress, and thriving in chaos rather than merely surviving it or being destroyed by it. This audiobook teaches anti-fragile mindset mastery through the psychology of stress inoculation that reveals how controlled stress builds resilience, the neuroscience of post-traumatic growth that shows how difficulty can make you stronger, the practices of deliberate stress exposure that build anti-fragility systematically, and the systems of chaos adaptation that make uncertainty your advantage rather than your enemy. Stop breaking under pressure and start getting stronger from stress. Stop avoiding chaos and start thriving in uncertainty that destroys fragile competitors. Anti-fragile mindset gains from disorder. Stress inoculation builds unbreakable resilience. Controlled exposure creates compound toughness, and systematic resilience generates the strength that comfort and stability make impossible. Beginning now. Chapter 1. You are fragile. Recognize how stress weakens rather than strengthens you. You are fundamentally fragile in how you respond to stress and difficulty, breaking under pressure rather than getting stronger from it, weakening progressively when facing stress instead of building resilience through challenge, deteriorating rapidly under chaos rather than thriving in uncertainty and volatility, and systematically avoiding all difficulty rather than using challenge as powerful stimulus for growth that makes you stronger, tougher, and more capable of handling future adversity. The fragility manifestations appear through specific recognizable patterns you can observe once you become honest about your actual responses to stress. Stress avoidance shows itself through treating all pressure as enemy to escape rather than growth opportunity to embrace. Comfort-seeking appears as constantly staying in safe, protected zones where nothing challenging ever happens. Chaos aversion manifests as needing stable, predictable conditions to function at all. Challenge avoidance reveals itself through consistently choosing easy, comfortable paths over growth-promoting difficult ones. Protective behaviors appear as building elaborate walls against any difficulty or discomfort. Fragility breaks under stress. Anti-fragility strengthens from stress. Build anti-fragility or remain fragile and weak. The fragile antifragile comparison reveals fundamental differences in how people respond to identical stressors. Fragile people break completely under stress that challenges them. Robust people resist stress, maintaining their current state without breaking. Anti-fragile people actually gain strength from stress that would break or maintain others. Fragile people avoid all difficulty instinctively. Anti-fragile people deliberately seek controlled exposure to stressors for growth. Research by Nassim Taleb on anti-fragility demonstrates that fragility fundamentally means being harmed by volatility and stress. That robustness means being resistant to volatility without gaining from it. That anti-fragility means actively benefiting from volatility and disorder. That systems without regular stressors inevitably become weak and fragile. And that controlled stress exposure systematically creates strength that comfort and stability make impossible. The devastating cost of remaining fragile accumulates relentlessly, including complete inability to handle inevitable difficulties that all achievement requires, debilitating dependence on stable conditions that rarely exist in reality, severe competitive disadvantage versus anti-fragile competitors who strengthen from same challenges that weaken you, extremely limited growth from comfortable comfort zone, living where no adaptation happens, and catastrophic breakdown when significant challenges inevitably appear in your life. Fragility breaks under stress. Anti-fragility strengthens from stress. Build anti-fragility or remain fragile and weak. Recognition of your current fragility requires brutally honest assessment through tracking carefully how stress actually affects your performance and well-being, identifying specific avoidance patterns preventing growth, assessing objectively your fragility versus resilience across life domains, acknowledging honestly your comfort dependence, and understanding that maintaining fragility absolutely guarantees failure when difficulty inevitably arrives. You recognize fragility now. Next, you must understand anti-fragility psychology. Chapter 2. Understand anti-fragility psychology, the science of gaining from disorder. Anti-fragility operates through specific psychological and biological mechanisms that enable you to gain actual strength from disorder rather than being harmed by it or merely resisting it. The anti-fragility definition means fundamentally gaining from volatility and stress rather than being damaged, getting progressively stronger from challenges rather than weaker, thriving genuinely in chaos and uncertainty rather than merely surviving, actively benefiting from disorder rather than suffering from it, and improving systematically through controlled exposure to stressors rather than deteriorating. The stress response mechanisms show that acute short-term stress triggers powerful adaptive responses in your body and mind, that the hormesis principle demonstrates how small stressors systematically strengthen biological systems, that chronic, uncontrolled stress depletes resources while acute controlled stress builds capacity, that deliberate controlled exposure creates lasting resilience and adaptation, and that systematic avoidance of all stress inevitably creates profound fragility. Controlled stress builds strength. Stress avoidance creates fragility. Embrace optimal stress or remain weak. Research by Nassim Taleb on anti-fragility science demonstrates that anti-fragile systems actively love volatility up to a certain optimal point, that stressors applied in the right dose systematically strengthen systems rather than weakening them, that complete absence of stressors inevitably creates fragility in any system, that overprotection consistently leads to weakness, not strength, and that controlled disorder strategically creates strength that stability and comfort cannot build. The hormesis principle explains the fundamental mechanism. Small, carefully controlled doses of stressors benefit the organism dramatically. That poison administered in small dose becomes powerful medicine. That exercise initially damages muscles, which then strengthen beyond previous capacity. That intermittent fasting stresses metabolism, which then improves and adapts. And that cold exposure challenges thermoregulation, which then becomes more efficient and resilient. The post-traumatic growth research demonstrates that trauma can lead to significant growth, not just psychological damage. That difficult experiences often create profound positive changes in people. That adversity frequently strengthens rather than permanently weakens those who face it. That controlled challenge systematically builds capabilities that comfort prevents. And that meaningful growth happens exclusively outside comfort zones, never within them. The dose-response relationship reveals critical nuance. Too little stress inevitably creates fragility through lack of adaptation stimulus. Optimal controlled stress creates growth and increased capacity. Excessive uncontrolled stress creates damage and breakdown. That finding the right dose enables anti-fragility development. and that progressive exposure systematically builds capacity over time. Controlled stress builds strength. Stress avoidance creates fragility. Embrace optimal stress or remain weak. You understand now that anti-fragility is not mystical concept, but biological reality, that controlled stress exposure triggers measurable adaptations, that avoidance of all stress guarantees fragility, that hormesis principle applies across domains, and that strategic stress inoculation is how you systematically build resilience and capability. You understand anti-fragility psychology now. Next, you must practice stress inoculation. Chapter 3. Practice stress inoculation. Build resilience through controlled exposure. Stress inoculation systematically builds lasting resilience through deliberate controlled exposure to specific stressors in carefully managed doses. The inoculation principle operates exactly like medical vaccines work. Vaccines expose your immune system to small, controlled dose of pathogen, building immunity. Controlled stress exposure builds psychological and physiological stress resilience. Progressive challenge methodically develops specific capabilities. Systematic exposure creates measurable adaptation. And building tolerance through graduated stress prevents being overwhelmed by larger stressors. The stress inoculation protocol involves first identifying specific stressors you need to build tolerance toward, starting with small, manageable doses that challenge without overwhelming, progressively increasing exposure systematically over time, maintaining absolute consistency in exposure practice, and allowing adequate recovery between exposures for adaptation to occur. Stress inoculation builds resilience. Stress avoidance maintains fragility. Expose yourself progressively or stay weak. Research by Andrew Huberman on stress inoculation demonstrates that controlled deliberate stress exposure measurably increases overall stress tolerance. That deliberate cold exposure specifically builds resilience transferring across domains. That conscious breathwork creates stress adaptation affecting multiple systems. That physical challenges directly improve mental toughness and resilience. And that systematic exposure literally rewires your stress response, making you more resilient. The exposure progression follows proven systematic pattern. Start with minimal stressor that is barely uncomfortable. Maintain exposure consistently until adaptation clearly occurs. Increase intensity or duration slightly after adaptation. Repeat process until new baseline is firmly established, and continue progressive exposure systematically building ever greater capacity. The common inoculation practices that effectively build broad resilience include cold showers, systematically building temperature stress tolerance, intermittent fasting, creating metabolic stress adaptation, high-intensity exercise, developing physical stress capacity, public speaking, progressively building social stress resilience, and challenging conversations, systematically developing conflict tolerance and composure. The recovery principle requires understanding that adequate rest between exposures is essential for adaptation, that you must not exceed your current adaptation capacity, that respecting individual limits initially prevents injury and burnout, that building gradually rather than rushing prevents setbacks, and that allowing sufficient time for biological adaptation is non-negotiable. Stress inoculation builds resilience. Stress avoidance maintains fragility. Expose yourself progressively or stay weak. You understand now that stress inoculation is not suffering for suffering's sake, but systematic capability building. That controlled exposure creates adaptation that random stress cannot. That progressive challenge builds compound resilience. That recovery enables adaptation to occur, and that stress inoculation is fundamental practice for developing anti-fragile mindset and capacity. You practice stress inoculation now. Next, you must embrace voluntary hardship. Chapter 4. Embrace voluntary hardship. Seek difficulty that strengthens you. Voluntary hardship means deliberately choosing difficulty that builds strength rather than reflexively avoiding all discomfort and challenge. The voluntary hardship principle involves actively seeking growth-promoting challenges rather than avoiding them, consciously choosing difficulty over comfort deliberately and systematically, genuinely embracing discomfort that builds valuable capabilities, volunteering enthusiastically for hard assignments others avoid, and intentionally making life harder in strategic ways to become a stronger person. The hardship-growth relationship demonstrates that comfort consistently maintains your current limited capacity, that challenge systematically expands capabilities beyond current limits, that voluntary difficulty builds lasting resilience and toughness, that chosen hardship creates growth mindset and confidence, and that imposed hardship without choice often damages rather than strengthens. Voluntary hardship builds strength. Comfort-seeking maintains weakness. Choose difficulty or remain fragile. The voluntary versus imposed distinction matters profoundly for outcomes. Chosen difficulty creates empowering growth mindset. Imposed difficulty often creates disempowering victim mentality. Having control over hardship fundamentally determines your response to it. Voluntary challenge builds genuine confidence through mastery, and forced difficulty often breaks people rather than strengthening them. Research on deliberate practice demonstrates that voluntary challenge is fundamental to building expertise, that self-imposed difficulty consistently creates growth and improvement, that chosen hardship systematically develops resilience and capability, that deliberate discomfort progressively expands your comfort zone, and that systematic challenge builds capabilities that comfort makes impossible. The hardship categories that effectively build comprehensive strength include physical challenges building both body and mind simultaneously, mental challenges expanding cognitive capacity and mental toughness, social challenges developing interpersonal skills and confidence, financial challenges creating resourcefulness and problem-solving ability, and time challenges improving efficiency and prioritization skills. The implementation involves scheduling regular voluntary challenges on calendar as non-negotiable, choosing progressively harder difficulties as capabilities increase, maintaining absolute consistency in exposure to challenge, tracking measurable growth resulting from challenges, and celebrating increased capacity that challenges create. The Misogi practice demonstrates voluntary hardship principles powerfully. Annual extreme physical or mental challenge, pushing far beyond normal comfortable limits. Voluntary suffering building profound resilience. Completing builds confidence dramatically and permanently, and creating defining achievement that transforms self-concept. Voluntary hardship builds strength. Comfort-seeking maintains weakness. Choose difficulty or remain fragile. You understand now that voluntary hardship is not masochism, but strategic strength building. That chosen difficulty creates growth that imposed hardship often prevents. That deliberate challenge expands capabilities systematically. That celebrating difficulty rather than avoiding it transforms your relationship with stress. And that embracing voluntary hardship is how anti-fragile people systematically build capacity that fragile people lack. You embrace voluntary hardship now. Next, you must build physical anti-fragility. Chapter 5. Build physical anti-fragility. Use body training to strengthen mind. Physical anti-fragility developed through systematic training directly builds mental resilience because mind and body are deeply interconnected systems, not separate entities. The mind-body connection demonstrates that physical stress systematically builds mental toughness, that body adaptation teaches mind how to adapt to challenges, that physical challenge creates measurable psychological resilience, that training body trains mind simultaneously through shared neurological pathways, and that physical anti-fragility enables and supports mental anti-fragility development. The physical training principles that build anti-fragility include progressive overload, gradually increasing stress over time, adequate recovery, allowing adaptation to occur between stressors, intelligent variation preventing adaptation plateau, absolute consistency, building compound resilience over months and years, and training specificity, ensuring you develop the exact capabilities needed. Physical training builds mental resilience. Sedentary living maintains fragility. Train body or weaken mind. Research on exercise psychology demonstrates conclusively that physical training significantly reduces anxiety and depression, that strength training specifically builds confidence and self-efficacy, that endurance training develops mental toughness and persistence, that challenging workouts measurably increase overall stress tolerance, and that regular exercise literally rewires stress response, making you more resilient. The training types that effectively build anti-fragility include strength training, creating progressive adaptation to resistance, high-intensity intervals building stress tolerance through repeated challenge, endurance training developing mental resilience through sustained effort, martial arts combining physical and mental challenge simultaneously, and outdoor activities creating environmental adaptation to unpredictable conditions. The cold exposure practice specifically builds multiple forms of resilience: metabolic adaptation to temperature stress, mental resilience through deliberate discomfort tolerance, powerful physiological hormesis response, brown fat activation improving metabolism, and stress inoculation through controlled challenge transferring to other domains. The intermittent fasting practice creates valuable adaptation: metabolic flexibility and improved insulin sensitivity, autophagy process, cleaning up damaged cells, enhanced mental clarity and focus, hunger tolerance, building impulse control, and hormetic stress response, benefiting overall health. The physical challenge transfer principle means that body resilience consistently transfers to mind, that physical adaptation teaches mental adaptation principles, that training effects translate across completely different domains, and that physical anti-fragility enables broader life anti-fragility. Physical training builds mental resilience. Sedentary living maintains fragility. Train body or weaken mind. You understand now that physical training is not just about body, but profound mind training, that body stress creates mental adaptation, that physical challenge builds psychological capabilities, that training systematically develops anti-fragile capacity, and that physical anti-fragility is foundation for comprehensive life resilience. You build physical anti-fragility now. Next, you must develop cognitive anti-fragility. Chapter 6. Develop cognitive anti-fragility. Strengthen mind through intellectual challenge. Cognitive anti-fragility requires deliberately exposing your mind to intellectual challenges that systematically expand mental capacity and resilience. The cognitive challenge principle involves consistently tackling problems beyond your current capacity, learning outside your intellectual comfort zone, engaging with genuinely difficult material requiring sustained effort, wrestling productively with complex concepts that initially confuse you, and building intellectual resilience through systematic challenge rather than always choosing easy, familiar content. The mental strain benefit demonstrates that intellectual difficulty systematically builds cognitive capacity, that struggling productively with problems strengthens thinking abilities, that confusion often precedes genuine understanding, that mental effort creates valuable neural adaptation, and that cognitive challenge progressively expands capabilities that easy thinking maintains. Cognitive challenge builds mental capacity. Intellectual comfort maintains limitations. Challenge mind or remain mentally weak. Research on neuroplasticity demonstrates that brain adapts measurably to cognitive demands you place on it, that challenging tasks create new neural connections, that difficult learning builds brain resilience and flexibility, that mental challenge prevents cognitive decline, and that intellectual stress creates adaptation, making you smarter and more capable. The cognitive challenges that effectively build anti-fragility include learning difficult new skills requiring sustained practice, tackling complex problems without clear solutions, reading challenging material requiring deep concentration, engaging in strategic games demanding planning and adaptation, debating difficult topics requiring clear thinking, and solving puzzles beyond your current ability level. The growth zone concept reveals optimal challenge level. Comfort zone maintains current limited capacity. Learning zone builds capabilities through manageable challenge. Panic zone overwhelms and damages through excessive difficulty. Optimal challenge exists in learning zone, and progressive difficulty systematically expands zones over time. The deliberate confusion strategy recognizes that confusion indicates learning is actually happening, that avoiding confusion completely prevents growth, that embracing not knowing enables genuine learning, that tolerating ambiguity builds intellectual resilience, and that comfort with discomfort enables cognitive growth. The intellectual humility requirement involves accepting your current limitations honestly, welcoming being proven wrong as learning opportunity, seeing ignorance as growth opportunity, not shameful weakness, embracing learning discomfort as sign of progress, and celebrating intellectual challenge rather than avoiding it. Cognitive challenge builds mental capacity. Intellectual comfort maintains limitations. Challenge mind or remain mentally weak. You understand now that cognitive anti-fragility develops through systematic intellectual challenge, that mental strain creates adaptation, that confusion is learning signal not failure, that intellectual humility enables growth, and that challenging your mind systematically is how you build cognitive capabilities that easy thinking makes impossible. You develop cognitive anti-fragility now. Next, you must build social anti-fragility. Chapter 7. Build social anti-fragility. Strengthen through relationship challenges. Social anti-fragility develops through deliberately engaging in challenging interpersonal situations that systematically build social resilience and skills. The social challenge principle involves having difficult conversations rather than avoiding them, setting firm boundaries despite discomfort and potential conflict, expressing unpopular opinions when appropriate, navigating conflict constructively rather than avoiding it, tolerating social rejection without catastrophizing, and building relationship depth through challenge, not just superficial comfort. The social stress types that build resilience include conflict requiring skillful resolution, criticism demanding thoughtful response, rejection needing healthy processing, disagreement requiring diplomatic navigation, confrontation demanding courage and composure, and vulnerability creating uncomfortable exposure. Social challenge builds relationship resilience. Conflict avoidance maintains shallow connections. Engage difficulty or remain socially fragile. Research on social resilience demonstrates that conflict avoidance systematically prevents relationship depth, that difficult conversations consistently build stronger bonds, that constructive disagreement improves relationships over time, that boundary setting creates mutual respect, and that vulnerability enables authentic connection impossible without it. The social inoculation practices that effectively build resilience include regular difficult conversations on important topics, deliberate boundary setting despite discomfort, expressing true opinions despite potential disagreement, addressing conflicts directly rather than avoiding, requesting feedback actively from others, and tolerating social discomfort without immediate escape. The rejection tolerance building involves systematically exposing yourself to possible rejection, not avoiding situations where rejection is possible, processing rejection constructively as information, learning valuable lessons from social failure, building resilience through repeated exposure, and recognizing rejection as feedback, not permanent verdict on your worth. The conflict navigation skills that enable anti-fragility include addressing disagreement directly rather than avoiding it, separating person from problem being discussed, focusing on solution, not blame or being right, maintaining composure under social stress, and using conflict to deepen mutual understanding. The authentic vulnerability means sharing true thoughts despite judgment risk, expressing real feelings despite potential rejection, being genuine rather than performing acceptable persona, accepting that authenticity sometimes creates conflict, and recognizing real relationships withstand disagreement. Social challenge builds relationship resilience. Conflict avoidance maintains shallow connections. Engage difficulty or remain socially fragile. You understand now that social anti-fragility requires facing interpersonal challenges, that avoiding all conflict prevents deep relationships, that vulnerability builds connection, that rejection tolerance is learnable skill, and that social resilience develops through systematic exposure to challenging interpersonal situations. You build social anti-fragility now. Next, you must create financial anti-fragility. Chapter 8. Create financial anti-fragility. Build wealth that benefits from volatility. Financial anti-fragility means systematically building financial position that benefits from market chaos and economic uncertainty rather than being destroyed by volatility. The financial anti-fragility principles include having optionality, creating upside from volatility, maintaining large margin of safety, protecting against downside, avoiding catastrophic downside risk completely, benefiting from disorder and chaos, and building position that gains from uncertainty. The barbell strategy demonstrates practical application, extreme safety in majority of portfolio, small calculated bets with unlimited upside potential, avoiding middle ground moderate risk completely, combining hyper-conservative with hyper-aggressive positions, and protecting downside while capturing asymmetric upside. Financial anti-fragility gains from chaos. Financial fragility breaks during crisis. Build anti-fragile position or risk ruin. Research by Nassim Taleb on financial anti-fragility demonstrates that concentration inevitably creates fragility, that diversification creates robustness, that optionality creates anti-fragility, that excessive debt creates catastrophic fragility, that ownership creates resilience, and that asymmetric payoffs enable anti-fragility. The fragility sources that must be eliminated include high fixed costs requiring constant income, excessive debt magnifying downside risk, concentrated income sources creating vulnerability, lifestyle inflation creating expense rigidity, and lack of savings creating acute vulnerability to disruption. The anti-fragility builders that create resilience include multiple independent income streams, low fixed costs allowing flexibility, high savings rate creating cushion, valuable portable skills, strong network providing opportunities, minimal debt reducing vulnerability, substantial financial cushion, portable career enabling mobility, and location independence providing options. The optionality principle reveals that keeping options open has significant value, that flexibility enables opportunity capture, that rigidity inevitably creates fragility, that adaptability enables anti-fragility, and that options cost little but provide large upside. The volatility advantage works effectively when you have stability to weather chaos comfortably, resources to buy assets during panic, skills to capitalize on disorder, flexibility to adapt quickly, and position to benefit from others' fragility. Financial anti-fragility gains from chaos. Financial fragility breaks during crisis. Build anti-fragile position or risk ruin. You understand now that financial anti-fragility requires systematic position building, that optionality provides asymmetric payoffs, that debt creates fragility, that multiple income streams create resilience, and that strategic financial position enables you to benefit from volatility that destroys fragile competitors. You create financial anti-fragility now. Next, you must practice chaos adaptation. Chapter 9. Practice chaos adaptation. Thrive in uncertainty rather than requiring stability. Chaos adaptation means systematically building capacity to thrive in uncertainty rather than requiring stable, predictable conditions to function effectively. The chaos adaptation principle involves developing genuine comfort with uncertainty and ambiguity, building flexibility, enabling rapid adjustment to change, creating systems and approaches that work in disorder, maintaining high performance despite chaos, and gaining competitive advantage from volatility. The stability dependence problem demonstrates that requiring stable conditions inevitably creates fragility, that depending on predictability prevents valuable adaptation, that needing control creates debilitating anxiety, that stability addiction prevents necessary growth, and that chaos aversion absolutely guarantees breakdown when disorder eventually arrives. Chaos adaptation creates opportunity. Stability dependence creates fragility. Learn to thrive in chaos or break when it arrives. Research on adaptability demonstrates that ability to handle uncertainty reliably predicts success, that flexibility enables opportunity capture, that rigidity inevitably creates vulnerability, that adaptation capacity determines survival, and that chaos navigation is entirely learnable skill. The uncertainty tolerance building involves deliberately putting yourself in uncertain situations, practicing making decisions with incomplete information, taking action despite unpredictability, developing comfort with not knowing, and building confidence through successfully navigating chaos. The rapid adaptation practices that build resilience include experimenting with new approaches quickly, adjusting strategies immediately based on feedback, abandoning what doesn't work without attachment, trying multiple approaches simultaneously, maintaining flexibility in methods, and staying committed to goals while flexible in approach. The improvisation skills develop through regularly acting without perfect information, creating solutions on the fly, thinking creatively under pressure, adapting to unexpected circumstances, maintaining composure in chaos, and leveraging whatever resources are available. The chaos opportunities recognition means seeing disorder as advantage opportunity, recognizing that volatility creates valuable openings, understanding that competitors' fragility is your opportunity, positioning strategically to benefit from others' chaos, and maintaining resources to capitalize on uncertainty. Chaos adaptation creates opportunity. Stability dependence creates fragility. Learn to thrive in chaos or break when it arrives. You understand now that chaos adaptation is learnable capability, that uncertainty tolerance builds through exposure, that improvisation develops through practice, that chaos creates opportunities for prepared, anti-fragile people, and that thriving in uncertainty provides competitive advantage over stability-dependent fragile competitors. You practice chaos adaptation now. Finally, you must understand permanence. Chapter 10. Anti-fragility is permanent practice. Strength building requires ongoing challenge. Building anti-fragile mindset is not one-time achievement, but permanent practice requiring ongoing exposure to stressors and challenges throughout your entire life. Without sustained, deliberate exposure to difficulty, your hard-won resilience degrades back to fragility. Stress tolerance decreases progressively without maintenance. Valuable adaptation reverses without continued challenge. Developed capabilities atrophy without regular use, and you inevitably revert to fragile state that chaos destroys. Daily non-negotiables for maintaining anti-fragility include exposing yourself to controlled stressors, seeking voluntary challenges consistently, practicing discomfort tolerance, navigating uncertainty deliberately, and building progressive resilience systematically. Temporary challenge creates temporary resilience. Permanent exposure creates anti-fragile strength. Commit permanently or revert to fragility. After months of consistent practice building anti-fragility, profound transformation occurs as you shift from breaking under stress to strengthening from it, from avoiding challenge to actively seeking growth opportunities, from fragile to robust to genuinely anti-fragile, and from chaos victim to chaos beneficiary. The integration stages progress predictably. Conscious incompetence, where you recognize current fragility, conscious competence, where you deliberately build anti-fragility, and unconscious competence, where you automatically gain from stress. This transformation requires months of progressive stress exposure, not weeks. Accepting challenge as permanent lifestyle, not temporary project. Committing to ongoing difficulty forever. Understanding anti-fragility enables all lasting success. And maintaining practice of controlled stress exposure. Anti-fragility becomes fundamental identity through permanent practice, transforming you completely from fragile to robust to anti-fragile, from stress victim to stress beneficiary, from chaos sufferer to chaos thriver, from difficulty avoider to challenge seeker, through refusing to choose comfort over growth. Temporary challenge creates temporary resilience. Permanent exposure creates anti-fragile strength. Commit permanently or revert to fragility. You understand now that anti-fragility requires permanent commitment. That temporary challenge creates only temporary resilience. That ongoing exposure maintains and builds capacity. That comfort inevitably leads back to fragility. And that systematic challenge is how you permanently transform from fragile person who breaks under stress to anti-fragile person who gains strength from disorder. You have learned 10 principles for building anti-fragile mindset. Stop breaking under pressure and start getting stronger from stress. Stop avoiding chaos and start thriving in uncertainty that destroys fragile competitors. Anti-fragile mindset gains from disorder. Stress inoculation builds unbreakable resilience. Controlled exposure creates compound toughness. And systematic resilience generates the strength that comfort and stability make impossible through permanent commitment starting now. You have learned 10 principles for building anti-fragile mindset. You are fragile. Recognize how stress weakens rather than strengthens you. Understand anti-fragility psychology, the science of gaining from disorder. Practice stress inoculation. Build resilience through controlled exposure. Embrace voluntary hardship. Seek difficulty that strengthens you. Build physical anti-fragility. Use body training to strengthen mind. Develop cognitive anti-fragility. Strengthen mind through intellectual challenge. Build social anti-fragility. Strengthen through relationship challenges. Create financial anti-fragility. Build wealth that benefits from volatility. Practice chaos adaptation. Thrive in uncertainty rather than requiring stability. Anti-fragility is permanent practice. Strength building requires ongoing challenge. What matters now is action today. Identify one controlled stressor to expose yourself to. Start stress inoculation practice immediately. 5 daily practices starting tomorrow. Controlled stress exposure, voluntary challenge, physical training, intellectual difficulty, chaos navigation. Every single day, without exception. This builds anti-fragile resilience. This creates compound strength. Stop breaking under pressure and start getting stronger from stress. Stop avoiding chaos and start thriving in uncertainty that destroys fragile competitors. Anti-fragile mindset gains from disorder. Stress inoculation builds unbreakable resilience. Controlled exposure creates compound toughness, and systematic resilience generates the strength that comfort and stability make impossible through permanent commitment starting now.